Erev Shabbat Shalom Rabotai. We're continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Kilayim. We're up to Perek Dal Mishnah Gimel. In yesterday's Mishnah, Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel had a disagreement, a machloket, about how much empty space you need before you can plant seeds in the perimeter of the vineyard, the Mechol HaKerem. Yesterday's Mishnah understood Mechol HaKerem, perimeter of the vineyard, to mean the area between the end of the vineyard and the wall around the vineyard. That area we understood yesterday to be called the perimeter, Mechol HaKerem. Today's Mishnah is going to give a different definition of what Mechol HaKerem is. What does it mean, perimeter? Rabbi Yehuda says, En ze ela geder HaKerem. That case that you use to describe the perimeter of the vineyard is none other than the fence of the vineyard. When you said yesterday, the area between the end of a vineyard and the wall around the vineyard, that case is none other than the fence of the vineyard. It does not require 12 amot between the vineyard and the fence in order to be able to plant there, according to Netanel. According to Rabbi Yehuda, when Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel had a disagreement about the perimeter of the vineyard, they didn't mean the area between the edge of the vineyard and the wall. That area, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is called Geder HaKerem, the fence, not Nechol, not the perimeter. So therefore, the area between the edge of a vineyard and its fence is not subject to the 12 amma measure required for the Mechol HaKerem perimeter, according to Bet Hillel. According to Rabbi Yehuda, even if there is just 6 amot between the vineyard and the fence, you can plant the seeds in the last 2 amot, obviously because you have the path or the work, you have the path, right, or the work area. On the other side, you have the path area you have, so you can only plant 2 amot next to the fence. So then what is the perimeter of the vineyard that Bet Hillel says you need 12 amot separation, you need 4 amot of the path, 4 amot of farmable area, and then 4 amot of work area? Ben Shnei Keramim. Rabbi Yehuda says it's the empty area between 2 vineyards. Since this area lies between 2 vineyards, we have to leave 4 amot for each vineyard as its work area, and an area of 4 amot in between to plant, so it can be called a field of its own, not an extension. That's when Bet Hillel says that you need 12 amot between the vineyard and the work area. You need the work area, vineyard, and then plantable area afterwards. Now, Rabotai, when we spoke about earlier in the beginning of this perek, we said that you need 16 amot in a case where you have a patch, a bald spot in the middle of the field. We called it the clearing of the field. That's not a contradiction here. Why? Because that case in the Mishnah, when we said the area between 2 vineyards, the clearing, we spoke about the bald spot, that was once part of the vineyard, but the vines were destroyed. Therefore, it requires a larger separation. Here, when we say the area between 2 vineyards, there was never a vineyard there. It was always empty to begin with. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda makes this distinction. The Tana of the previous Mishnah doesn't make a distinction. He says the area between 2 vineyards is the same as the bald spot in the vineyard. It always would require 16 amot. However, like we said, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. And he says that if it's an area that was never planted between 2 vineyards, you would only need 12 amot. Now, the Mishnah is going to explain what kind of fence is enough to separate a vineyard from the area beyond it in regards to Kilayim. And the Mepharshim explain that what kind of fence basically allows a person to plant seeds on the other side of the fence, even within the 4 amot work area of the vines. Now, even though the Mishnah already taught this measurement earlier on in chapter 2, Mishnah 8, that was only when we spoke about separation between 2 species of plants. Our Mishnah is going to discuss separating a vineyard and other species. The Ezehu Gader, what's considered a fence in regard to Kilayim of the vineyard? Shu gabo asrat tvachim, any wall that is 10 tvachim high. And the Mepharshim explain that there's no minimum thickness for the wall. Even the thinnest wall or fence is good enough as a separation. However, there's a minimum length. It has to be at least 4 tvachim long, 10 tvachim high, but no thickness. The charitz shu amok asara v'rachab arba, or a ditch that is 10 tvachim deep and 4 tvachim wide. Likewise, Rabotai, the ditch can also serve, so to speak, as a fence to separate between the vineyard and any other species, but only if it is both 10 tvachim deep and 4 tvachim wide. If it's a ditch that's narrower than 4 tefachim across, that's too narrow to be called a separation because one can walk over it. And if it is not 10 tefachim deep, then that's not considered a divider. That is in Rabotai Mishnah Gimel. Mishnah Dal now is going to continue on this theme of fences that serve as dividers between vineyards and other species. Mechitza kanim. If you have a mechitza, a partition of standing sticks lined up one next to the other, that can only serve as a fence provided im en ben kaneh lechavero shlosha tefachim. If there is no gap of 3 tefachim between one stick and the next, kedei sheikenes hagedi, 3 tefachim being long enough for a baby goat to enter, harezu kimchitza, then that's considered a valid mechitza. And the Toshim explain that it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. We use this a lot by Hilchot Sukkot, that any objects that are less than 3 tefachim apart from one another, they're considered to be connected as though the gap between them is filled. That's what we call levud. Again, brought up a lot in Hilchot Sukkot. So a row of sticks that you stick into the ground and spaced less than 3 tefachim apart, that's considered a solid wall. And therefore, one can have a vineyard on one side and then sticks, and then plant the seeds on the other side of the sticks, even if there is less than 4 amot between the seeds and the vines. Right? So you have the vineyard, the sticks, and then on the other side of the sticks, you're able to plant seeds, even if it's less than 4 amot, apart from each other, the seeds and the vineyard. Now, since baby goats can get through a gap that is 3 tefachim wide, why mention baby goats, right? So the Rambam explains, since baby goats can get through a gap that is 3 tefachim wide with ease, sticks that are separated by this distance are not considered a fence. It would have to be less than 3 tefachim from each other. Now, the Mishnah discusses a case where you have a fence that has a hole in it, meaning you have here gaps that are at least 3 tefachim wide. Obviously, if the gaps are narrower than 3 tefachim, it's considered a wall, like it has no gaps at all, so the cape because of lavud. So we're talking about now a fence that has gaps that are 3 tefachim wide. The gedel shenifratz, if a fence is broke open, now meaning part of the fence fell down or broke apart, it left an opening in the fence. The halacha is like this: ad 10 amot hu kepetach. Up to 10 amot, the opening is considered like a doorway, and one can plant even opposite that open space. And the Mefarshim explain, doorways are a normal part of a fence, since there has to be a way to enter and exit this area that you locked off. Therefore, the doorways are considered part of the fence, even though they are open. And they also serve to divide one side from the other. So for that reason, you're allowed to plant a different species opposite the open doorway of the vineyard, even within 4 amot of the vines. If the opening is more than that, more than 10 amot, it cannot be considered a doorway, and you cannot plant seeds opposite the open space unless they are separated from the vineyard by 4 amot. And the Mefarshim explain, if the gap in the fence is wider than 10 amot, you cannot consider that a doorway in the fence. Rather, it's viewed as an open area that is not part of the fence. If a person wants to plant seeds opposite that open area, he has to distance it the usual 4 amot from the vineyard. Now, the solid sections of the wall that are left on each side of the opening, they continue to be separations as long as they are 4 tefachim long. However, they cannot be considered one continuous fence. They're considered separate fences. So therefore, a person would still be allowed to plant different species opposite the standing parts of the fence, just not opposite the open part of the fence. Right? Because again, we said the wall has to be 10 tefachim high and at least 4 tefachim long. There's no thickness minimum, but it has to be 4 tefachim long. The Mishnah now explains how many doorways a wall can have. If many openings broke open in the fence, meaning you have breaks that were each of a size that could be considered a doorway, meaning between 3 tefachim and 10 amot wide. How many can you have? If the total amount of fence that is standing is still bigger than the total amount that is open, mutar, that's permitted to plant alongside the entire fence, even opposite the open sections, because each of these breaks is considered a doorway. But if the total amount that is open is more than the total amount that is standing, then it is forbidden to plant opposite the open sections, basically following majority. If the majority of the fence is open, then the standing sections do not combine to be considered one long fence. Rather, each section that is standing is considered a separate fence. Therefore, the breaks between them are not doorways but open areas. You would not be allowed to plant opposite the open space unless you have 4 amot separation between the seeds and the vineyard. However, one can still plant opposite the standing sections if it is more open than standing. That is the end of today's Mishna Yomi, Rabotai. Everybody should have a Erev Shabbat Shalom. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.